Welcome to our seminar today on the Ukraine War, Perspectives from Northeast Asia. A perspectives that I think are not given adequate attention in U.S. policy circles, at least publicly. My name is Andy Cutchins. I'm a senior fellow at the Center for the National Interest, and I'll be moderating our discussion today. The connection between the Ukraine war in Asia and Asia started from the very beginning, with speculation about, from the beginning of the war, about what Xi Jinping kinds of lessons he is taking away as he ponders what to do with Taiwan, and how far China is ready to go to support his best friend, self-claimed best friend, Vladimir Putin. And then, of course, with the relationship between the DPRK and provision of munitions, and most recently, in the last month or so, North Korean troops coming to the Russian Federation and fighting there now, I think the topic has acquired all that much more saliency. And we have two terrific speakers. Akihiro Iwashita is a professor in the Department of Slavic Eurasian Studies at Hokkaido University. His research, including books and articles, have focused on border studies, Russian foreign policy towards China and Japan, and China-Central Asia relations. He's been a visiting fellow at the Brookings Institution here in town and familiar to many of you, and also at the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies at Harvard. In fact, he just came down from there after giving a talk yesterday. He has won multiple awards for his work, including the Osaragi Jiro Prize for commentary by the Asahi Shimbun newspaper, and the JSPS Prize, Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, among others. Akihiro will speak first, and he has a PowerPoint presentation. And our second speaker is Jay Koo, a colleague of mine, a senior fellow at the Center for the National Interest. He's a widely renowned expert on Korea relations with China and Japan and human rights in Asia more broadly. From 2007 to 2018, he was the director of the U.S. Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins SAIS, where I did my PhD. He was also director of the Freedom House's Human Rights in North Korea project, a congressionally mandated international campaign under the North Korea Human Rights Act of 2004. I also want to note that Jay is an award-winning producer of historical documentaries, including I Am Grace, Rescued by Fate. Sorry, I can't read my own handwriting. Only my mother was able to interpret it. The Last Tsar and Forgotten Victory. So I think there's going to be lots to talk about. So let me turn the floor, with no further ado, over to Akihiro Iwashita.
Thank you, Andy, for having here today. I'm back Washington today. So today is my topic about the kind of the after the Ukraine war period. Particularly, I pay attention much about those Asian issue because anywhere the different stakes, different interests, different concept. So I think that I urge all you, the Washingtonian, to think of the kind of different conception we have in Northeast Asia. So usually the Washington DC centered map, you think like that. When I was at the Brookings almost 15 years ago, usually the Russia was discussed is an extension of European sphere, but the Japan and China, North Korea, South Korea was in kind of West orientation. You have a good researcher working both, but basically separately discussed. So but now after the Ukraine issue, Europe and Asia is more deeply linked, interacted. So now we discuss more. So in Japan centered, we have a different idea because we are the front of the U.S.-Japan alliance faced against the China and Russia over the kind of Europe. And if you are the Europeans, so the kind of Atlantic alliance, Japan's there. But anyway, we are very familiar with discussion Russia and China in one box. So at the beginning, I said something about the kind of my thesis of of course, many of you are already shared what the Russian invasion in Ukraine is challenging fundamental tenets of the post-World War II and post-Cold War order. Russia itself destroying the order that it creates and initiates and great responsive power. This is the most important starting point. Then I have some published the articles in Eurasia Border Review. If you are interested in my thesis more, please check this in Google. So if we have marked some timelines, Cold War 1.0 finished. Now this is a very disputable Cold War, really Cold War, or what kind of Cold War difference from Cold War 1.0 if we name it. But anyway, the new ice age has come. This is the truth. So I put the name of the happy 30 years period after the collapse of the Soviet Union up to the Ukraine war. Then 30 years is a kind of exceptional warm world. So I called it integration period. So why I put this name? Because the thinking of this new Cold War, we should discuss about on the experience of integration, happy world, relatively international relations, because this is the difference of the Cold War 1.0. So I have a couple discussion here, but today I concentrate only Northeast Asia. So in short, now is just a starting point of a new ice age. So not so freeze so much. Some place is water remaining. Some place is very hard, the frozen. Therefore, the 2.0, what orientation 2.1 or 2.2, I call it the fault lines in flux, particularly in the except European shelter. We have so many flags, kind of the global South countries approach or the other countries approach, even Europe in Hungarian difference, and Northeast Asia. Asia, how many countries sanctioned against Russia? Japan, South Korea, and Singapore, and plus Taiwan. These four, factually only four countries and region strongly against, but really strong. Singapore is kind of strong, but they have ASEAN format. Sergei Lavrov came to ASEAN plus Russia. Singaporean diplomat hug or shake a hand with Sergei Lavrov. It is unbelievable for us, even in Japan. And Korea, recently different, owing to the North Korea, the Russia's new rapprochements. But before that, even after the Russian invasion, Korean, South Korean sanctions very, very soft. I back later. So this is our map. We think like that always. So I skipped India issues. China, probably we have much discussion, but just one mention in China. It's very China's position is the fundamentally support Russia, but they do not want to show these faces because some kind of they do not want to be isolated. Something they keep their interest. This is true. But some add something that even in Russia, I'm thinking Chinese expert on Russia, even uneasy about Russia. They thought that we are very happy Russia now look at on West. If they turn back to the East, something happened because the Chinese expert on Russia is very, very harder toward Russia. And in turn, the Chinese expert, non-expert of Russia, rather welcome Russia to offset, counter United States influence with Russia. So such kind of a difference among the scholars on China, but under the Xi Jinping monolistic foreign policy, this kind of discussion never be open. But some China expert on Russia never trust Russia, even now. But it's difficult to divide Russia and China now because they are very cemented as a quasi allied country. But more important thing that the point, some military experts has no future to Russia. They do not need to Russia, even in offsetting influence of United States against China. China probably can do it alone, no support Russia. This is very interesting. No future for Russia, some Chinese say to me, of course, in a private conversation. But going to the Taiwan probably you are very important in East Asian studies circle. I found recently the important, interesting point of the so-called Taiwan clause in the joint statement in Japan, Russia, and China. After inauguration of Xi Jinping, no mention about Taiwan. After Xi Jinping inauguration, before that, sometimes mention about Taiwan, but no mention about Taiwan in Russia-China joint statement. But it's resumed suddenly February 1st, 2022. It's kind of non-limited partnership declaration statement. After that, every year this clause was developed and more harder against Taiwan. Just the Barodai Club at the end of this month, the Putin criticized Taiwan so much because sanction, harder, high-tech sanction. But please imagine, look at this, February 4th, before invasion. Why suddenly Taiwan mentioning reappeared first after Xi Jinping's inauguration? This is a puzzle. I have no proof, but I thinking that probably they have some behind-the-scene conversation. Putin says that we are prepared for Ukraine. Okay, you should prepare for some more support to Taiwan issue in China. I think that's kind of a deal. Probably they have. I should check to this more fact in Taiwan. I do it. So South Korea. So South Korea is very, very soft sanction, like the Japan sanction after 2014, after the Crimean annexation. South Korea did not want to be involved so much in sanction. So particularly Ambassador Genovese told many times, South Korea was best country among unfriendly camps. So they tried to de-link South Korea from Japan and the United States. Factually, Russian easily get in South Korea, and even South Korean university sometimes invite Russian Ambassador Genovese to have lecture after the invasion. In Japan, we never saw that phenomena. And also some business still working here or something in the market of South Russia. So I was thinking of why. One of the reasons that South Korea does not much attention to the international norms. I analyzed the Korean newspapers. So rarely mention about international norms, infringement of Russia. I think that they do not rely much on the traditional international norms because back to history, early 20th century, Korea had been ignored by great powers for independence. They went to Hague for appeal to be independent from Japan, ignored. Therefore, they even now have some distrust on international norms, particularly sovereignty or something. And also, if you look at the Korean papers, so many phrases, what relation with North Korea under the Russian invasion? They care much, 80% North Korean issue in the context of Russia's invasion. Therefore, they did not want to do strong sanction against Russia because of Russia leaning much more in North Korea. But their approach was blocked thanks to Putin's Kim Jong-un kind of hacks. So this is a new point. So this is a point now in South Korea's the kind of departure from the best friend situations. They are preparing for more the weapons for the aggressiveness, or they have kind of own anti the missile systems. Probably, I think they export. Probably, Professor know much about me, but this is the point. South Korea is changing now. Finally, Japan. Probably your United States people think that we are allied. We have some interest because China is issued, Russia is issued. Yes, it's a political motivation, it's higher. But you look at Japan well, after the World War II, Japan has completely changed this regime, democratized, and survived in the development on the international norms, and also the peaceful kind of current regime's top priority of Japan to keep the status quo of this kind of current international norms. Therefore, Japan's even now, the Russia's invasions clearly infringement international norms. Japan really support for Ukraine against Russia's. But of course, we have neighbors. We share something local interests. So this is tricky. You are lucky because far from Russia, but we are neighbors. How we manage neighbors is a very important issue. 3 minutes. So finally, I just tell you the very, very recent new things. This November issues. The Putin recently had changed his approach toward Japan. Before that, Putin is very, very tightly reacted against Japan's sanction. Factually, no meeting, no negotiations at all. But the recently Russian foreign services did show a goodwill to Japan's government. Japan's government thinking, what happened to Russia? How we react to that. This is not unpublished. This is unpublished information, but this is going on. And recently, Barudai Club, the Putin says that to Japanese participants, oh, please, Japan, be back to us. We are prepared for having chat with you. It's amazing. It completely changed the mission. And one more thing that during APEC in kind of Colombia or like Peru, then they Ishiba, new premier, meet Xi Jinping. Good talks. Our government never expected Xi Jinping want to have a bilateral meeting so long with Ishiba. But China now is bit change mind attitudes against Japan. Really, really gradually soften. What does it mean? Probably something Trump impact one, because Trump don't care other allies. So the kind of it's a good chance for the China, Russia to do something to de-link Japan from the United States. And also the Japan's new premier has a different idea. The kind of he sometimes says that we create NATO type of Asian security system. It's the unrealistic, but Korea, Japan's more tightened without historical issue, without a difference of some consciousness. Its security point of view, it's kind of plus Australia and having some Taiwan, or kind of it's a good for Trump because the Allied more prepared for supporting the United States and lessening the cost of the United States. This kind of the calculation we have. Therefore, China and Russia want to have Japan beat than more than before. Such kind of situation is more in flux. So we do not know what the fault line going on, the difference, but still we are under the Cold War 2.0 situation. What orientation we foresee? This is today's my topic to discuss with you together. Thank you.
Aki, thank you so much. That was a really comprehensive take on the waterfront. I hope that you have got a patent or a brand on the term the interglacial period. It's a great one, and there's a great book there to be written entitled The Interglacial Period. It reminds me a bit of E.H. Carr's The 20-Year Crisis in between World War I and World War II. Okay, Jay Koo, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Professor Yoshida kind of provides the macro picture of Northeast Asia's perspective on the current state of Russia-Ukraine war. I'm going to limit my comment to South Korea and how South Korea sees itself now that North Korea, its northern counterpart, has now actively participated in the Russia-Ukraine war. So here's what we think we know. And so I want to preface my comments to say that this is a moving target. And so whatever we say today might be overcome by events today, tomorrow. And if that's the case, that's the case. So, 2 days ago, it was reported that as many as 100,000 North Korean troops might be committed. I've heard estimates that go high as 200,000 to 250,000. We know that some 10 to 15,000 North Korean soldiers are training in Russia, and maybe as many as 3,000 are in the front lines. We know that there are North Korean casualties. And was it just yesterday or the day before President Biden approved US missiles to be used well into Russia, deep into Russia? And just yesterday, Putin made some threatening remarks using nuclear weapons. So how did we get here? And what are the Seoul's views? Many of you know the timeline better than I do, so I won't go through the details. But just to talk about what's happening recently, we think, I think last week, Putin and Kim did sign a defense pact that was signed in June, but ratified in the last week. Just 2 weeks ago, North Korea fired off an intercontinental ballistic missile. A Korean National Assemblyman said it's a missile that we've not seen before. It was different in size. There had not been an engine test, a solid engine test before, possibly suggesting that maybe Russia has provided technology to North Korea. So what is South Korean perspective and what are they worrying about? And I think largely there are 3 broad topics. They're worried about North Korea acquiring technology to perfect their nuclear weapons, their delivery system. Second, North Korea getting substantial economic assistance, thereby kind of detaching or minimizing the future role of South Korea in provision of economic assistance to improve inter-Korean relations. And another is the sense that North Korea can feel emboldened by a robust military alliance with Russia, thereby being more adventurous elsewhere, maybe initiating another Western Yellow Sea naval battle. So there's a lot on South Korea's plate. South Korea doesn't think, at least not yet, that they've gotten the kind of technical help from Russia yet. I was told, and I'm not an expert in this field, but something about the metallurgy that the North Koreans quite haven't figured out, the strength of the iron that goes into the missile, it's the resistance to heat, all of this high-tech stuff that they are trying to acquire from Russia. We think it's been reported in the press that North Koreans are going to get something like $2,000 per month. Almost all of it will be going straight to Kim Jong-un, I'm sure, if we know from other North Korean laborers that go around the world working, and their money that they make goes into Kim's coffer. If you think about $2,000, 100,000 soldiers, that's $2.4 billion. South Korean intelligence estimates that they can send, and Kim Jong-un is willing to spend 10% of his army. And the rationale is they're starving anyway. And these soldiers would prefer to get new clothes, new uniforms, get out of the country, have some meals. And also there are benefits to their families in choice of housing, maybe better ration of food. And so for the Korean soldiers, this is, even at the risk of dying, that this is better than staying in North Korea. So how's this being played out in the current Yoon administration? If you read Korean English newspapers, you would think that this is on the top of their list. It's constantly President Yoon, the foreign minister, professors talking about North Korea's participation in the Ukraine war. If you go to the Korean newspaper in Korean and see their PDF, you see that this is a very small part of the front page. It's Korea is right now so complicated by domestic politics. The president is besieged by an opposition-controlled National Assembly that is going after his wife, from everything from receiving handbags to stock manipulation by her and her mother. The approval rating of the president is somewhere between 15 and 27%. There are other major policies wreaking havoc. You don't know this, but I was helping out Johns Hopkins med school professors about what's going on in South Korea. Since February, med school professors and doctors have walked off and gone on strike. Largely because the government wants to enlarge the number of spaces in med schools. Professors, doctors, and future doctor students have walked out saying that this already, it's an industry that they can't make money, and now it's just get worse. In fact, people can't get surgeries. My mother-in-law was lucky enough she was living more outside, and she was able to get a surgery in her broken shoulder because it's a regional surgery. But in Seoul, you can't get surgeries. A friend of mine had to, for her gallbladder emergency, had to use her famous, family political chit to get into a military hospital. And so these are the kinds of issues that you see in the front page. And then the opposition, led by the former governor and presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung, is under indictment and awaits 5 trials. And so the opposition is clearly not focused to be critical of where the administration is going. But the administration, or the president, has been very vocal in various international forums, criticizing North Korea's participation, the dangers of Korea's participation. And President Yoon has considered, publicly, he's considered sending military aid to Ukraine. But I think with the election of President-elect Trump, there hasn't been a similar statement coming out of Korea, and highly unlikely that the Seoul government will provide military assistance to Ukraine, given the public statements made by the incoming president about needing, wanting, and how he could end the war on his first day. And so I think the Yoon administration will walk gingerly and not do anything to offend, question the incoming administration. But what they are, I think, preparing to do is to send a small non-governmental contingent of, call it consultants or soldiers of fortune, that they are now putting together a team of ethnic North Koreans who may have had some experience in the North Korean military, who has escaped and now reside in South Korea, and that they've had military training in the North, they know military tactics. And their tasks, I am told, would be to monitor North Korea's communications and how it links to their tactics, and seems reasonable. And then also, if there are North Korean soldiers who are captured, that these individuals would be able to provide translation and so forth. But I think that the Korean government now, with the incoming administration, is calculating that there will be an end to war. And now their view is how to position itself in a post-war reconstruction. And so I had an interesting conversation last night with a friend of mine. In fact, last week, the Ministry of Land and Infrastructure, which is the government ministry that develops Korea's land and also secures construction for Korean government agencies and also private companies, have been directed to put together a team to assess what Ukraine's reconstruction needs are, and to prepare, should that day come sooner, that Korean companies would be better suited to take advantage of that. So here, as I joked, come the vultures. And this may be where the Korean government will provide some kind of military assistance in a post-war Ukraine, whether directly or indirectly. Again, this will be tied to their commercial objectives. The opposition has been mildly critical. I mean, they verbally support Ukraine, the integrity of Ukraine, but their position is that Korea should not be in a position where it would worsen its national security. Hence, that is vis-a-vis North Korea on the Korean Peninsula. And so the opposition has been very critical in that sense about the government committing to doing anything that may lead to some kind of actions by North Korea on the Korean Peninsula. And even if South Korea does aid, their criticism is just do it. Don't make it a public announcement. And I think this is some of the talk that's going on with analysts on TV. So the headlines you see there and here are ways, are simply to vilify North Korea and its participation, how North Korea is internationalizing the war, how escalation could lead to a world war, and how North Korea will eventually get the technology it needs. But I want to put this in a more kind of a larger theoretical framework. What do we know about a small state needing to survive in an anarchical self-help system? I think addressing some of these issues, we get a better understand where North Korea is. And I think the North Korean case is very similar to another case that occurred almost 60 years ago. And that was South Korea's participation in the Vietnam War. So starting in 1964, non-combatant troops were sent, and by end of 1965, there was a fighting infantry and a Marine brigade. Almost 19,000 soldiers were sent, and over the 9-year period, some 320 to 350,000 soldiers rotated through Vietnam. Almost 5,000 South Korean soldiers were killed, and as many as 4 to 6 soldiers were captured. We know that they were captured and presumably taken to North Korea and never to be heard again. So if you think about North Korea's rationale, what was South Korea's rationale back then? Well, even as early as 1950s, President Syngman Rhee had offered President Eisenhower troops in Vietnam for service as a way to thank the United States for coming to its defense in 1950. When President Johnson started the whole more flags, many flags, where he was looking for some 70,000 combat troops from our allies, South Korea joined. South Korea was now under a different political leader, strongman Park Chung-hee, who did not have a great relationship with President Kennedy's administration. And so when this call came in 64, President Park jumped at it. And his rationale was Park was unsure that the military alliance that was just 10 years old would be sustained. At the time, still believed that North Korea had a much more formidable army. Park was nervous that an escalation in the Vietnam War would require the withdrawal of US troops, which has constantly been South Korea's fear. And the rationale was, you need a division, we'll give you a division. And he also calculated rightly that US would increase its military aid and economic aid. At the time, Korean soldiers received $38 a month. Some $200 million in military and economic assistance flowed in. In the 9-year period, some 40% of export earnings came from South Korea's participation in the Vietnam War. This was South Korea's first globalization. And I know from my own colleagues who are maybe 10, 15 years older, that they had an uncle who went to Vietnam, came back and brought back his first Webster dictionary. This is how he studied English, access to books that were brought back from the American PX. Of course, there are differences, and there are differences many, but even under the most dictatorial Korean president, South Korea was nothing like North Korea. But if we see where North Korea is coming from, perhaps we get a better understanding that this is not just a power play for this instance. They are trying to be independently strong to deter aggression, and hence using nuclear weapons, using their cheap labor to gain currency, a new defense pact that may also be used to deter South Korea and the United States. And finally, I think North Korea is sending a message, it's loud and clear, that they don't need the US, they don't want the US. And it's not sure if incoming President Trump, despite his personal relationship, would alter this new kind of maybe perhaps strategic change that North Korea has made. So let me leave it at that, and I welcome questions from the audience.
Thanks, Jay. Really terrific presentation also. We've got about a half hour left. I will use the prerogative of the chair to make a bit of a comment and pose 2 quick questions to our speakers, and then open it up to the floor. You know, I got to hand it to Kim Jong-un. The guy's a hell of a negotiator to get $2,000 a month payment for North Korean soldiers in Russia for now. I mean, that is just about the payment that Russian soldiers are receiving, which is very, very. It's a very attractive economic incentive for the Russians, not to speak of a North Korean soldier. What you've told us about the DPRK Russia relationship is disturbing, and not only does it seem like it can change the military balance to some extent on the Korean Peninsula, but it also can change the Russians' position vis-a-vis Ukraine, if indeed the flow of soldiers increases to anywhere near the numbers of 100 to 200,000. It would seemingly make Mr. Putin less interested in some kind of a ceasefire or ending of the war soon, and I'm rather skeptical of that anyway. Also, just comment: I've never seen 2 leaders in my lifetime meeting in a summit who seemed so happy as Kim Jong-un and Putin in June. I mean, they were like, I don't know, 7th grade boys and they're, best friends forever. I mean, like they were at the amusement park at a carnival. It was quite striking, and the wording in the comprehensive strategic partnership agreement is troubling. I mean, there are security guarantees there for mutual provision of military aid. My two questions have to do with China. One, what is your personal perspective, and maybe the countries in which you come from, and perhaps how that may differ, on China's calculus about Taiwan after having watched this Ukraine experience now for almost 3 years, if there has been any change. Secondly, the conventional wisdom in reporting about the strengthening of the DPRK Russia bilateral relationship is reported, and it seems, I don't know what the evidentiary basis is. I can understand logic, but that this is irksome. That China is worried about it. That that North Korea was more of their ally, and they're not that happy with the Russians. I'm curious on your perspective on that question as well. Why don't we go, Aki? You can go, Aki, first, and then to Jay.
Okay. The concerning the Taiwan issue. So now today I pay attention much to the Russia issue and Taiwan.
Yeah.
But basically it's kind of more China-centered issues. Current the president of Taiwan is very, very prudent, and so he did not tell the independence of Taiwan publicly, but he just continued to express the de facto situation. It means that the independence continues de facto. So the China is very difficult to do something because, as you say, that kind of military operation is very heavier for damage for China. So even the Russia supports you imagine the Russia also do not be involved in Northeast Asian issues so deeply. So in that sense, I think the situation not so changed, but Taiwan itself is a very, very positive towards supporting Ukraine, or they pretend more democratic, more liberal camps against dictators. So this kind of more issue of the Taiwan's position in a sense, not the China's sense, I think. The DPRK Russia, it's good to discuss. I was very, very impressed by the first meeting of Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-il, father of Kim Jong-un, Putin's meeting in 2000. When the Okinawa summit was held in Japan, Putin, just new leader of Russian Federation, and dropped at Pyongyang to hug Kim Jong-il to land on the Okinawa. He said that the Kim Jong-il promised not to the launching the missile because we, Russia, support it. So after that, Kim Jong-un just laughed. It's a joking. This is a diplomacy of North Korea. I don't think Russia really believe on North Korea so much. This is a kind of axis of convenience. Even then the military mutual demands match up. I want to ask you also this point of,
Thanks.
you really believe in the relations?
Jay.
It all depends. So let me cover my ass. Your first question, I think China. China, I think, is not as perturbed as this. I think their kind of realistic thinking is this is not going to last. They're probably not sure how it may not last, but Russia, I don't want to say satellite states, but Russia's relationship with the close countries of, during the Cold War, North Korea, Vietnam, never really made an impact in the local culture and the local. So it's not, and so it's a very elite oriented, and sure, but I think the Chinese would be worried if this had a spillover effect that impacted their Taiwan outlook or something about U.S.-China relationship. If North Korea does perfect, I don't know, the delivery system or whatever it takes, and the alliance relationship puts safeguards, everything from more defense missile systems, or even, and this is the part I'm still working on, is either going nuclear themselves or requesting the reintroduction of tactical nuclear weapons. And that would, I think, get China's attention. And so in that sense, I think China would be worried, but I think right now they're not. So I was kind of working on this before the election because some of my contacts have said, yes, Trump is going to really try to end the war. And so even before the election, you recall his son, Donald Trump Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy wrote an op-ed piece, saying that the Biden administration should end the war immediately. And so I think there are, and who knows what the team is working on. But what I'd also kind of got a sniff was that in order to side with Russia over Ukraine, that Trump would have to get something back from Russia, and that ask. And what would that ask be? And I was told that one of the asks could be the decoupling of Russia-North Korea relationship. Could Russia sell out North Korea? Yeah, I mean,
We've done it before.
Done it before. So I mean, these are all moving targets, and I don't know who's working on this in the incoming administration, but it's not. I mean, it's, as my colleagues say, there's some crazy people coming in. I mean, there's some crazy ideas as well. Some crazy good and some crazy, and so we're seeing.
Thanks. Okay, let's open it up to the floor. Please identify yourself and keep your question comment brief. Mark.
Thank you. Mark Hatz, George Mason University. Thanks so much, both of you. My question is for Jay. Now, my question is maybe a naive one. It strikes me from South Korea's point of view, if there are 10,000, 100,000, 200,000 North Korean troops in Russia, that means there are 10 to 200,000 North Korean troops less on the Korean Peninsula. Is this one of those things that one decries as awful, but in fact maybe isn't such a terrible thing? I mean, it would be terrible if they come back with training, etc., and more weapons, but it strikes me that a lot of these North Korean troops, if they actually enter combat, are just plain not going to come back at all. And so I'm just wondering sort of the dynamic about that. And then Aki, you talked about South Korea had a soft sanctions policy with regard to Russia. Can you characterize Taiwan's sanctions policy? There have been articles about how Taiwanese semiconductors are getting to Russia even now as a sort of way to appease them. So hopefully you can address that. Thank you.
Okay. What happens if large number of body bags come back? I guess our calculus is, yeah, there are less North Korean soldiers to defend. But I think Kim Jong-un would be worried. We know from Kim Jong-un's, sending out of laborers, everything from cheerleaders to, factory workers, that when they come back, they're all isolated. They go through re-education camps, and what they, anything, then they take them out, sent to gulags, etc. And so would North Korea be impacted if there's a large number of body bags that came? I think it could. I think North Korea is always just a light match away from something drastic happening domestic. And it's one of those things. There's nothing in social science that says it can happen. And when it does happen, we'll look back and say, this was it. But, we don't know until it happens. But I think there is enough dissatisfaction. And some of my friends in Korea tell me that their defense estimates is that there is a lot of discontent in the army. And so in a way, Kim Jong-un sees this as an outlet to get those soldiers out. And how he, packages this as being faithful to the country, doing a service to the country, and your parents are going to be taken care of. They're going to get more food, better housing choices, etc. And that might keep, but I know Koreans. And if the Southerners are their brethren, people do not take deaths in the family very well. And that's why I was telling my Asian friends that the most nationalistic country is not China, Russia, Asia, it's US, it's us. Because we, when our soldiers, give their life to service, and when their parents are interviewed, what do they say? My son, Jimmy, fought for what he believed in. Well, what does a 19-year-old know about what he believed in Afghanistan, etc.? But we believe into this story. You look at the Koreans, and, in the naval clashes that happened, some 30, 40 naval, sailors died. And the minister goes to the memorial, and the mother grabs the minister's legs and says, "Bring my son back." All right. And so to me, there isn't this kind of patriotism or nationalism. They do it for service because out of coercion. And so I think if something happens, and it happens in large number, this could, I think, light something up in domestic politics in North Korea. And who knows where that's going to lead.
I think that my term of the integration period, Russia, even by year became dependent on China, even in under integration period. But those days, Russia wanted much better relations. They sometimes truly invite to Japan, like Abe administration, and also the good relations with South Korea. So, for example, the visa exemption back and forth agreement. But after the invasion, every relations changed. Probably Putin being shocked about Taiwan's strong sanction, including high-tech export prohibition. Because under integration period, Russia sometimes to say good point to China government, the kind of Taiwan is a part of Russia like that, even not shown on the joint statement. Russia keep officially this position, of course, but factually they want to have Taiwan high-tech techniques or something in the market. So it's very good relation, I think. But for Taiwan's, they look at the kind of invasion next days for us, as you know. Therefore, they really want to deter Russia. It means deter China in one side aggressions. But this is one reason, therefore, they're strongly sanctioned against Russia. For Russia, this is far east away, to northeast away, far from Europe. They didn't understand why Japan so strongly reaction, South Korea strongly reaction, even Taiwanese. Then I show that kind of Taiwan clause first shown before the invasion, the meetings, Xi Jinping and Putin. But next year, this phrase more widen or top. And next year, more wide and top and strong expression. Recently, just Barodai Club, Putin showed a good face to Japan, while he really criticized Taiwanese in public. Taiwan wants to be Ukraine, inviting third countries from outside. You won't be Ukraine. It's a very harassed for Taiwan. The Taiwanese are really angry. So this kind of a chain of distrust, mutual blaming like South Korea, then Taiwan. Now Russia needs Japan, really.
Okay, Ariel.
Ariel Cohen, the Atlantic Council. My first question is whether any of you have heard or can guess, the worst case, can guess, what is in the non-public part of the Xi-Putin agreement of eternal friendship, the 5,000 word communique of February 22. My hunch is there's something there we just don't know. My practical question is, to what extent Japan and South Korea are open to more military production? Because one of the things we're experiencing now is a shortage of anything from field artillery shells to cruise missiles to long fire missiles. To what extent US, Western Europe, Japan, Korea can bump up their military production in a significant way? Thank you.
Who wants to take that? Aki, you want to
Yeah.
go first?
First question is a bit of puzzle. We don't know the reality is just guess. But we share something about the Putin, how they prepare for operation, but no one expect this operation continues so long. The Xi Jinping understood that it's a kind of a shorter operation up to end soon, then the world not be changed so much, I think. Then we support, but you support Taiwan so much more. This is my estimation. Concerning the weapons, it's particularly difficult for Japan. I say that about the South Koreans' willingness now, but we Japan can't do it because of the constitution. We send some drones or some equipments, but we have strongly limitation. It's difficult for Japan, even right now, to do more. Rather, Japanese government, as far as I know, think about post the war support for Ukraine. They want to pay much more attention. But I think that South Korea is completely different. He said that kind of the really co-fighter anywhere with the United States. Therefore, the pressure is very higher than to us.
So on the first question, I'm not even going to pretend I know anything about that. So, so I'm not going to mention. But okay, but the arms objection, Korea is doing it. They have the capacity. Okay, well, they have the capacity on some issues, and so they can. But I'd heard from a former Korean defense minister that South Korea is getting a lot of order for arms from European countries. And this is the concern the Korean president has, which is, would the US look favorably or unfavorably? And since this is always the kind of the Korean dilemma for a president is, how does the White House think? And so my upcoming research next year is, how can Korea be a partner in a supply chain in the defense and also be a competitor with all of the American firms? And so that's a real concern. I think you see in the purchasing of American high-tech defense companies by Hyundai, Samsung, LIG. Recently, I've heard there's this thing called the Korea Premium, we've heard of Korea discount, and I had no idea what that was. And that was American startup tech companies that are selling, all of a sudden says, hey, we're going to be 50% more than our valuation because the Koreans are willing to pay for it. And so my friend was trying to buy a company for 100 million. I thought he had all agreed. And next day they said, yeah, no, today it's 150 million. It's called the Korea Premium. And so I think in certain capacity, the Koreans can. But in certain issues, there are just so many restrictions. For example, I know that I think Hanwha bought the shipyard in Philadelphia. I know that Korea has gotten some kind of an agreement to service American naval ships in Keje shipyard, etc. But there are all kinds of restrictions placed on technology transfers, things that I'm just learning. For example, a friend of mine who's trying to buy, there are laws that restrict foreign ownership. So he can only, I think, buy into maybe 40% of the company. There are all kinds of, I forget. There are, external boards created by the companies and it's just, as my friend says, it's just another layer of obstacle to getting things done. And so can Korea have the capacity? Sure. I think in some of the weapons that they are kind of known to make and are very good, and that's going to be hopefully showcased in our national interest. But it's not easy because I think there's the political aspect, and then there are actual business obstacles that allow this. And it's not altogether clear to me where Korea stands, and especially now that they think the Ukraine war is going to come to a close.
Yes.
Thank you. The name is Georgi Pamirotov. I'm the Bulgarian ambassador to the United States. Very interesting perspective, quite different from the one we have. Thank you very much. My question touches upon the technology transfer from Russia to North Korea. And more precisely, does it include high-end technology that could constitute an imminent threat against South Korea that South Korea cannot counter? This is the question. Thank you.
Jay?
If there are technology transfers, it would be for their delivery system, maybe the miniaturization of the warheads, etc. That doesn't really impact South Korea. That really impacts us, and it's Kim Jong-un's strategy to deter us. And if you have an incoming president who's made public statements about the defense of Taiwan, Taiwan is really far. Others, and I think this is going to get more vocal, is do we really, can we, should we, do we want to trade Seoul for LA? And those kinds of things. And I think that makes South Korea very vulnerable. And that's why I think the popular opinion is that they should go nuclear. But I don't think the Koreans have any idea of what it takes to go nuclear, despite all the kind of novel-based articles that come out that they can, have a system in place in, 6 weeks or 6 months, whatever. So no, I don't think that's possible. But I think really that aspect of your question is really directed at us. Is that if Kim Jong-un is able to perfect it, then there is some element of the ability to deter us. And for the Koreans, then I think it just weakens their position. And if the US and the incoming administration chooses to have some kind of dialogue that eventually would lead to more of an arms control, that would really make South Korea vulnerable. And that's why I think before all this happens, South Korea should ask the US, and that's a tough question domestically, for the reintroduction of tactical weapons. And so I was actually looking into this question and
Tactical nukes.
tactical nuclear. And so my PhD advisor was the National Security Council Asia director at the time when that decision was made. And so he said, but it wasn't really something that was covered in the National Security Council. This was really President Bush and Brand Socroft, and said, go look up their book, World Transform. So I ordered it, went through it. There's hardly any mention of this. And so what I gathered from back then was that one, we don't need tactical weapons in Korea because the Gulf War had shown our smart bombs and technologies surpasses anything that they have. The other is, hey, if we get the nuclear weapons out, then we have the moral high ground to get North Korea to halt their nuclear program. Well, none of these kind of considerations exist anymore. And so my view is, how does South Korea go from extended deterrence provided by the United States that may be questioned down the road to a direct deterrence? And looking at various options, I think the best option for Korea is to get the direct deterrence with the reintroduction of tactical nuclear weapons. Back in 2011, Gary Seymour inexplicably said if the US would do it, if the Koreans asked, and then the Pentagon said, oh, no, 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 and then the White House had to put out a statement saying, no, that's not true. But I think that issue probably needs to be revisited.
Thanks. Okay, Wayne.
Wayne Murray, the American Foreign Policy Council, and this is a comment on this analogy of the South Korean participation in the war in Vietnam, which I remember quite well. I'm not saying that there's a reasonable analogy that there's going to be a legacy in Russian-North Korean relations, but I think one should not underestimate how important that legacy was in the thinking of the U.S. military. The U.S. military of that generation really developed a regard, a respect, an affection for their South Korean counterparts, which I think exaggerates is beyond anything you'll find in the NATO countries. I mean, a lot of guys I know, it wasn't because they served in South Korea, it's because they served together in South Vietnam, and it left behind a sense of fraternal relationship, which still exists, even though most of those guys are retired. I'm not saying that that's going to happen between the Russians and the North Koreans. I'm just saying you raise an interesting historical point, which most people in this room are probably not old enough to remember. But I can tell you, having worked with the Marine Corps and the U.S. and the Pentagon, that legacy of regard for South Korean soldiers as this fraternal thing is alive and well.
Well, and also
yes.
American military fought a major war in Korea with millions of South Korean soldiers, which we have not actually done with our other major allies. So it's a good point. I'm looking around the room. I don't see a hand up, so I'm going to sneak in the last quick question, then we're going to wrap it up. This is directed to both of you. Do you think that North Korea would have taken these decisions or even to provide arms and soldiers, some combination thereof, to Russia without consulting China?
I think he could. Maybe after the meeting, China gets notified. I think Kim Jong-un has a sense of kind of confidence that his father and his grandfather did not have. It could be out of just being very young, maybe not understanding the history, but it's also maybe his view of having grown up and seeing that the Chinese haven't been all that forthcoming when North Korea needed help, and maybe an opportunity to stick a finger. I've always, when I talk to South Koreans who have had access into North Korea through during the periods where we were able to send shipments of food, etc., the elites just do not like China. But the people, because their livelihood is so connected to Chinese trade, that they have a very favorable view, but the elites do not. And so I was rather surprised when that was the kind of the consistent message I'd gotten from various humanitarian groups that were interacting with North Korea.
Aki, any final thoughts?
Yeah, well, I basically agree to him. Just I am thinking Donald Trump would have again meeting with Kim Jong-un, and what the consequence would have. I'm wondering if you have something so to the Trump's meeting with Kim Jong again or not, but because he can stop him or not.
Yeah, you can't. And so, starting like 3 months ago, I started reading all of the books by people in the Trump administration that came out and wrote books.
Yeah.
Some good, some are better. I thought
What's your favorite?
Josh Rogan's Chaos Under Heaven, how Trump's administration made China-Asia policy fabulous. I mean, you just know someone at that White House was feeding all that information. Nikki Haley's book was, and it had a lot of, cute stories, but and then, of course, John Bolton's book provides but there's a commonality here. None of these people were able to rein in on the president, keep him in focus. And so that kind of circus is likely to be repeated in this administration. And so, when people say, I can't believe he chose these people, well, one, I don't know if they're going to get ratified. And two, none of these people are going to last more than 10 months. There's just too many scandals in the waiting. So it would be a tumultuous first year. So going back to, it's like Trump, in fact, can, I think, meet Kim Jong-un. There's no one that can tell him no. If he thinks, because his best national security advisor is his instinct. And when he thinks he has the right instinct, then I think he'll go for it.
I think it's going to be a tumultuous 4 years. Personally, hey, I mean, it was tumultuous 4 years, 2016 to 2020. Also, I think it's important to keep in mind, both on domestic policy and foreign policy, that Donald Trump is effectively a lame duck president now. He can't run again. That's going to make a difference. Look, this has been a great discussion. Thanks, Aki and Jay, so much for your thoughtful thoughts. They're both thought-provoking. I learned a lot, and everybody did.